Hi everyone. This is Editing Renee, inserting this clip before the video that I just recorded. I went through all the questions from the book recommendations tag, and when I got to the question, books that don't feel like they got enough hype, I think I said Eleanor Catton's Birnam Wood, which is definitely one that I had in mind, but I forgot I wanted to say something. Two other books, just to give you an example of some that I've been thinking about that I didn't hear too much about after the International Booker, but were certainly talked about at the time. I read The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier, translated from the French. And I remember at the time I was like obsessed with his writing on that book. In that book, I highly recommend checking that book out. It was intense. Talk about a plot. Talk about propulsive. But his writing, the way he writes in that book, the way he can get inside characters, like switch perspectives, was insane. So check that out. I forgot to say it. And then I gotta say Vigdis Hjorth, a Norwegian author. I read back at the time of the International Booker, I read Is Mother Dead? And I was singing the praises of that book. And I don't see it around very much, but my gosh, is it worth it? Oh, talk about heart-wrenching. And then I just finished her other book, Long Live the Post Horn. It's more of a like gentle plot, really all about the internal experience of the characters. So I just forgot to mention those when you come to the question about they don't get enough hype, and I didn't want to leave them off. So here we go, the beginning of the video. All right, let's do it. Let's do a tag, the book recommendations tag that I saw the wonderful Nathan from Nathan's Nook do recently. It's a cool set of questions. I have the questions here. I found that by listening to Nathan's answers, I got to know Nathan a little better, and like that can be the whole point of a tag. So I thought that was really cool. So I'm not thinking too hard about these questions because I didn't want to get into analysis paralysis. So I'm just gonna wing it because this is inspired by Nathan. I will talk to you about my look. His vlogs so wonderfully include sometimes, and I'm just so fascinated by looks, fashion, even though I don't really like participate. But okay, this is a very old used Prana, not Prada. Prana is like, the activewear company, and they do all kinds of cute tops also. And then I have a pair of baggy but cuff from Old Navy. That's what I got going on. Okay, here's the questions. A book you tell people is your favorite. Well, this already is gonna get me into some trouble because I could never tell anybody a favorite book, but I can just like answer it in general, I think, because I can't choose. I would answer it this way. You're either going to find me reading a classic because I'm really exploring and loving the classics that I've been reading over the last couple years. I read classics back like a little bit in the 90s, in the early 90s, late 80s, but I've really started to continue that exploration, especially of authors that I've never read. And so that's why I'm reading Trollope and just absolutely adoring it. War and Peace for the entire year. I have read George Eliot for the first time, Charlotte Bronte for the first time, Kate Chopin, Edith Wharton. And then the other part is like indie bookstore. It's like an independent bookstore that's carrying all kinds of literary fiction, translated fiction from all the presses and publishers that I love. New Directions, Europa, Charco Press. What's the one that I just did? Virago. I just want to explore books that, on that side of things, that, they don't have to have a plot. They can be the interior experience of people. I just want to keep exploring books that, they don't need to change me. They don't need to teach me anything. but they somehow, through their writing style, ask questions, leave you with questions. They usually don't answer the question. And you know, I like a good romp. Indie bookstore classics. A book that's your guilty pleasure. I don't consider anything that I would read to be a guilty pleasure. But I understand the meaning of the question. I'm going to answer it by saying that my go-to set point whenever I'm between books, whenever I've just maybe started a few books that haven't clicked, I just need a resting place, a starting place. It's going to be an Anita Brookner, or I would say Barbara Pym, but really it's an Anita Brookner for me. I don't think I have, oh yeah, I have one here. I picked up a couple books here off my shelf, but like I love these editions. I've been collecting these used. This is one that I realized I haven't read yet. So I just pick these up whenever I see them for a steal. Yeah, it just level sets me. It level sets my nervous system. And I know I'm gonna get a good story, usually about a woman's experience. So, and then, Rachel Cusk is another one of my like go-tos, but more so, it's a very specific go-to. It's more so I'm on a plane, I'm feeling anxiety. I don't read physical books on planes in general, but on a plane, I know I have at least 2 of the trilogy, what are they called? Outline trilogy book. And I will just dip in to one of those. And it somehow just is a calming thing for me. I like that voice. I don't know, it just does something. Oh, I pulled an example. This isn't something, I wouldn't say this is something that everyone loved, but it is a book that I wanted to love and then I didn't love. I love Brandon Taylor. I loved Real Life. I connected with the main character whose name I'm forgetting now. I didn't connect with him. I felt empathy. Like I was rooting for him. I have not read Filthy Animals. I need to read Filthy Animals, but I was so eager to read The Late Americans. Like I always listen to his interviews. I love his Substack. I love reading articles of his in the New Yorker. So when this came out, I was on vacation and I picked this up at one of my favorite bookstores. I will link it. They had this and it's a signed copy and I actually bought it because I am just such a Brandon Taylor super fan. But other than the first chapter with Seamus, who I love as a character in this book, I just got lost and I never really connected in any way with the other characters. And especially when you get to the middle of the book and there's chapters that have to do with different characters, I would get them mixed up. Still a super fan though. Oh, a book you read the fastest. Any really plot-based book. Recently, that would be like last fall, I read Demon Copperhead and I read that so fast. I just needed to know what was happening with Damon. You talk about heart-wrenching. I just needed to know what was going to happen next. Were things going to turn around? Anytime he got a break, was it going to work out? So anything that's really heavily plot driven and it has a certain propulsiveness to it. The other book that I'm thinking about is Middlemarch. I just gobbled that up. A book that deserves more hype. I have one example here, but I first want to talk about something I thought about the other day when I saw this list. I don't know if Eleanor Catton's new book, Burnham Wood, has gotten a lot of hype. I think it got a lot of hype when it first came out, but I don't know what the general consensus is about that book. It was my first Eleanor Catton. I enjoyed my experience of reading the book better than when I was reading it. I think I was just so overwhelmed by the New Zealand landscape, wherever they were on this property, the characters, and how things were moving fast. In the first part of the book, Eleanor Catton is setting up the characters, and you learn about the head of this guerrilla gardening group, and then this woman who spent a lot of time, like 10 years, working for this leader. I don't remember anybody's names. And how this other party comes into play that's buying this property. and they end up going to, the guerrilla gardeners end up going to this property, this huge property. There's so many parts and pieces, and I was reading so fast, but I don't feel like it's gotten as much hype as I don't know, as it should. I don't know if I want to use that phrase, but it's interesting. I don't hear a lot about it, and it was cool. I really liked it. And then I just talked about this not very long ago. Alfred Hayes. Just go read Alfred Hayes, you know? Written in the 80s. Really, 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 like, to me, just this really line by line, sentence, paragraph level writing. Top notch. I marked so many pages. It was enjoyable to me. This was like top notch enjoyable. And I have to read his other. I think he only wrote 2 pieces of fiction, and he's like a poet and a screenwriter. A book that is becoming a movie or TV show. I wouldn't know. I'm just like the last person that would ever know anything about that. A book you've reread the most. Well, I did a video on the fact that I don't reread, but there are 2 possibilities for like this fall that I'm thinking about. Stoner by John Williams. I read this last fall and I loved it then. I adore this book. Like every page I was reading was blowing me away with the writing. How he captures the internal experience and just making Stoner a 360-degree person inside and out. Like, just amazing to me. And then The Pumpkin Eater by Penelope Mortimer. I don't remember now the experience of this book, but I want to. So I definitely am going to reread this one because I'm going to read finally Daddy's Gone A-Hunting, which I also own. So I just want to like get into her writing again, and I want to experience again at a level that I remember this book. And then, you know, I might reread this one. A book that deserves all the hype it gets. It's had a resurgence. It's talked about a lot. There is a gazillion booktube videos about it, but I'm gonna say The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I will not forget, well, I will never forget the reading experience. When that book first came out, I read it, and I just will never forget my reading experience of that book. I reread it in 2020, and I don't know, I didn't have the same experience, but I'm going to chalk that up to just being so much older and just not being able to have that reading experience again. I think I'm also answering another question that comes up in here, but that's okay. Yeah, I think it deserves all the hype that it gets because I just feel like Donna Tartt, along with Hanya Yanagihara, do character development, creating a world so well. I just feel like they do it so well. And I'm thinking of Yanagihara's To Paradise in this case. To Paradise is one that belongs in, like, maybe didn't get a whole lot of hype. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but oh my God, did I love all 3 worlds of that book. Probably world 1 and 3 the best, but like highly recommend. But yeah, I just think character development, sense of place, pacing, it's all there. A book you usually recommend, like I don't recommend books other than like talking on a video. And of course we're always recommending if we love something video to video, but like I don't recommend books to people. And actually nobody asks me. A book that has your favorite character or characters. I think right now I would answer that question by saying the characters in the Anthony Trollope series, the Barsetshire Chronicles. I mean, I have 2 more books to go. I love that. I love that I get to be with these characters. Trollope introduces new characters as he goes on in these books because sometimes they take place in other places other than Barchester Towers. But you're always coming back to the original cast that you meet in the first book, The Warden, and then the second book, Barchester Towers. And I just love this whole group of people whose names, of course, I can't remember at all right now, but I love them. I'm having so much fun with that series. A book you wish you could live in. Oh, I have a couple answers to this. I was thinking about atmospherically, like the time of history when A Movable Feast was written by Ernest Hemingway in the 1920s in this very privileged, yes, privileged. I was going to say privileged, swanky time, but Ernest Hemingway at the time he was in Paris, maybe the people around him had money, but he didn't have very much money. He was always scraping together money as he was trying to become a writer that could sustain himself. But the people around him had money. Shakespeare and Company, the bookstore, was a popular hangout. Gertrude Stein and Alice Toklas, F. Scott Fitzgerald, James Joyce. There's others that I'm not remembering, but that's one place. And then the other two are kind of like similar. Well, the one is similar in that this atmosphere in the Dud Avocado, Elaine Dundee's Dud Avocado, takes place in like the late 50s, and it's about an American woman who heads overseas. She has to get a job. Like, she's not getting her whole trip paid for by her parents, but I mean, after all, she is going to Paris, and she runs into other Americans. It just seems like this is a time where people are traveling abroad that have the money to do it, and just the whole swankiness and poshness, even though not everyone has a lot of money. She doesn't have a lot of money, but there are people she gets to know that do. So I really love that. And then another very atmospheric setting is, I'm thinking of Gavin Lambert's The Goodbye People in like 1960s LA. And like any type of, or many essays or books that Joan Didion has written about LA. She just makes it feel so super cool. Like, can I just bump elbows? This is the same LA that Eve Babbitt's was in. You know, they were bumping elbows. I feel like Joan Didion and her husband had more money than Eve Babbitt's, but certainly that's like, you know, rare air certainly going on there. Yeah, any of those places are dreamy. A book you thought you would hate but ended up loving. I don't think I thought I would hate this book, but I felt like I may not get on with it, and that is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I'm listening to it on audiobook, which is something super rare for me, but it's a fantastic audiobook with the narrator, the British narrator. I'm also reading along, catching myself up in chunks as I'm listening to the audio. So I'll catch myself up in the book. That's really cool because the translation in the book is different than the audio. And so it appears different on the page, and that's really fun. It's so funny. The cast of characters that Thomas Mann creates in this static place, this sanatorium or whatever they call it in the Swiss Alps, where people are mostly suffering from like different problems with their lungs and maybe old age. And he's visiting his cousin for 3 weeks, but then he himself becomes a little sick and he has to stay on for like another 3 weeks or something. And so it's a static setting and it's very routinized. And yet he adds all these colorful characters. I felt like I was going to be intimidated. A book that made you cry. I couldn't think of a book that's made me cry recently, but I do remember how I felt when I was reading Demon Copperhead and how heart-wrenching that book is and how hard it is to experience through the writing, Damon's experience with his upbringing. His mother is an addict. He has to experience family members dying, and he becomes a foster child. And then his experience through the foster system is so hard to read about. And then how does he make decisions without good role models? And what happens when he gets a break? Very sad, but also hopeful. A book you wish you could read for the first time. So many, but I picked one as an example, but there's so many. And I'm going to use The Goldfinch because, speaking of Donna Tartt and her ability to build a world, different worlds in this case, This is an epic book. It's a Bildungsroman. And so it doesn't just take place in, I guess it's New York City. Yeah, that's where it starts. But then you are taken to many other places, including outside of Las Vegas in like this very underdeveloped suburban neighborhood in the desert. I just remember my reading experience of this book. It's epic, so you're with it for a long time. I mean, maybe it's like reading Lonesome Dove or something. It's so long. Yeah, it's like 950 pages. That would be cool to just be entering into this world for the first time again. All right, well, that's it. Consider yourself tagged. If you don't have a BookTube channel, please feel free to answer any of the questions in this tag. I'll just paste them below. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Yeah, join the conversation. Let me know what you would answer in any of these questions. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.